My name is Jessica Morgan, and I'm 34 years old. I never believed in luck until that Tuesday night when my entire life changed. After years of struggling to pay off student loans and my mortgage as an accountant at a small firm in Denver, I stared at my lottery ticket in disbelief. $47 million. The numbers matched. Every single one. My hands trembled as I realized I was suddenly wealthy beyond imagination, but instead of screaming with joy, a strange calm washed over me. Right then, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't tell a soul. Not even my family. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Would you have kept your lottery win a secret too? Like and subscribe if you want to hear how this completely changed my life in ways I never expected. That first night after realizing I'd won was surreal. I couldn't sleep. I kept getting up to check the ticket, terrified I'd somehow misread the numbers or that the paper would spontaneously combust if I took my eyes off it. My modest one-bedroom apartment with its worn furniture and basic appliances suddenly felt like a strange cocoon. Inside these walls, I was still regular Jessica, but outside waited a new reality I couldn't quite comprehend. The contrast was jarring. My IKEA coffee table where the winning ticket sat was something I'd purchased during a sale 3 years ago, proudly assembling it myself to save money. My kitchen still had the mismatched dishes I'd collected over the years. The bathroom needed renovation, with its outdated tile and temperamental shower. Everything around me represented years of careful budgeting and modest living. And now, with 6 matching numbers, I could buy hundreds of apartments like this without blinking. Around 3 a.m., I started researching lottery winners online. What I found sobered me quickly. Stories about families torn apart by greed. Winners targeted by endless requests from distant relatives and strangers. People who blew through millions in months. The lottery curse seemed very real, with winners declaring bankruptcy, losing friends, developing addictions, and even being murdered for their money. One story particularly stuck with me, a woman in her 40s who won a similar amount to mine. Within 5 years, she was broke, divorced, and estranged from her children who had sued her multiple times. She said the worst part wasn't losing the money, it was discovering who people really were when millions entered the equation. By morning, I had a plan forming. I would tell no one about the full amount. I would collect the money anonymously if possible. My state allows winners to create trusts to protect their identity. I would continue living normally while quietly setting up financial security. And most importantly, I would find a way to help my family without them knowing the full extent of my wealth. That morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I spent hours researching financial advisors who specialized in sudden wealth. I needed someone trustworthy who could guide me through this without publicity. By afternoon, I had scheduled meetings with 3 different advisors and a lawyer specializing in lottery winners. The week that followed was the most stressful of my life. I kept the ticket in a sealed envelope, inside a waterproof bag, inside a fireproof safe I purchased specifically for this purpose. I was paranoid about losing it or someone discovering it. I checked it compulsively, sometimes waking up at night convinced it had disappeared. When I finally met with the financial team I'd selected, their advice aligned with my instincts. They helped me create a limited liability company that would claim the prize, allowing me to remain anonymous to the public. We developed a comprehensive plan for investments, taxes, and asset protection. The attorney drafted documents to shield my wealth from potential lawsuits and claims. I opted for the lump sum payment rather than the annuity, which reduced the amount to about $29.4 million before taxes. After federal and state taxes, I would walk away with approximately $18.2 million, still an unfathomable amount to someone who had been budgeting lunch money just days before. The day I went to claim the prize was surreal. I wore nondescript clothing, sunglasses, and a hat, terrified someone would recognize me despite the precautions. The lottery officials were accustomed to winners wanting privacy, but the process still felt exposed. Signing the documents that transferred millions into my newly established trust made my hand shake so badly I could barely complete my signature. After everything was processed, I sat in my car in the parking lot for nearly an hour, unable to drive. The reality hit me hard. I was now wealthy. Extremely wealthy. But to the world, I needed to remain regular Jessica Morgan, the accountant who wore the same 5 outfits to work in rotation and brought homemade lunches to save money. The first meeting with my full wealth management team was another culture shock. Suddenly, people in expensive suits were speaking to me with deference I'd never experienced. They discussed strategies for capital preservation and generational wealth transfer, concepts that had never been relevant to my life. They spoke about millions like I used to think about hundreds. One advisor casually mentioned options for my philanthropy strategy, as though charitable giving at scale was now an obvious part of my life. I left that meeting with a thick binder of documents, investment prospectuses, and planning worksheets. My simple financial life of checking account, savings account, and 401k had exploded into trusts, investment portfolios, tax strategies, and estate planning. The complexity was overwhelming, but beneath the intimidation was a growing sense of security I'd never felt before. That night, I looked around my apartment and made another decision. I wouldn't change anything immediately. No shopping sprees. No luxury car. No mansion. I would continue living exactly as I had been while I adjusted to this new reality and tested my plan with my family. The real challenge was about to begin. Returning to work the following Monday was one of the strangest experiences of my life. I sat at my desk processing expense reports and preparing tax documents, the same tasks I'd done for years, while my bank account contained more money than everyone in the building combined would earn in their lifetimes. When my coworker Diane complained about the rising cost of daycare, I nodded sympathetically while mentally calculating that I now earned more in daily interest than her monthly salary. The cognitive dissonance was intense. In meetings, I found myself drifting away, wondering why I was still there when I could be anywhere in the world. When my boss criticized a minor error in my spreadsheet, I had to suppress the inappropriate urge to laugh. None of this mattered anymore. Yet I knew maintaining normalcy was crucial for my plan. The hardest part was seeing my family struggle while sitting on a solution to all their problems. The following Sunday, we had our monthly family dinner at my parents' modest home in the suburbs. My mother, Jane, still used the same worn cookware she'd had since I was a child, insisting it worked perfectly fine despite the peeling nonstick coating. My father, Robert, at 68, continued working part-time at the hardware store despite his arthritis because their retirement savings weren't quite enough. My sister, Natalie, arrived late as usual, looking tired with her 3 kids in tow. Her husband, Greg, had lost his job at the manufacturing plant 6 months ago and was working 2 part-time positions that paid less while still searching for something permanent. I could see the strain in her eyes as she tried to maintain a cheerful demeanor, but the worn edges of her clothes and her children's 2 small jackets told the real story. My brother Mike arrived last, his forced enthusiasm failing to mask his worry. His landscaping business was struggling after losing several commercial contracts to larger companies. He'd invested everything into that business, and his pride prevented him from admitting how bad things had gotten. But I knew he'd been sleeping in his office some nights after renting out his apartment to save money. My cousin Amy joined us too, a single mother taking night classes at the community college while working days as a medical receptionist. She was trying so hard to build a better life for her 5-year-old son, but childcare costs alone consumed nearly half her income. Watching them all pretend everything was fine while struggling broke my heart. I could solve all their problems with a fraction of my wealth. But the cautionary tales of lottery winners haunted me, how sudden money often destroyed families rather than helping them. I needed a way to test the waters before revealing my secret. During dessert, I carefully introduced my plan. "I've got some unexpected news," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "A great-aunt on Dad's side passed away. I didn't really know her, but apparently, she left me a small inheritance." All eyes turned to me. My father looked confused. There was no wealthy great-aunt in our family. Before he could question it, I continued quickly. "It's not life-changing or anything, about $30,000 after taxes." But it got me thinking about family and helping each other. I paused, watching their reactions carefully. "I'd like to share some of it with all of you." Not as gifts, but as interest-free loans to help with whatever you need most right now. The reactions were immediate and varied. My mother shook her head. "Honey, that's your money. You should save it for your future." Mike's expression was a complex mix of relief and wounded pride. "I don't need charity, Jess." Natalie's eyes widened with immediate interest. "That's so generous. The kids need so many things right now." Amy looked down at her plate, clearly uncomfortable. "That's incredibly kind, but I couldn't take your inheritance money." I had anticipated these responses and pressed on. "It's not charity, and I've thought this through. I'm in a stable position with my job, and this extra money is unexpected. I'd rather see it help the people I love than sit in a bank account." Over the next hour, I outlined my proposal. I would provide each household with a loan between $5,000 and $10,000 based on their specific needs. No interest, flexible repayment terms, but with clear expectations about how the money would be used. I presented it as a way to help them through temporary difficulties while preserving their independence. For my parents, I suggested using the money for some needed home repairs and medical expenses they'd been postponing. For Mike, I framed it as a business investment in marketing his landscaping services. For Natalie and Greg, the focus was on catching up on bills and providing necessities for the children. For Amy, I emphasized education costs and childcare to help her finish her degree faster. Throughout the conversation, I carefully observed each family member's reaction, looking for signs of entitlement, resentment, or genuine gratitude. This would be my test. Not just how they used the money, but how receiving it affected our relationships. By the end of the evening, everyone except Mike had cautiously accepted my offer. He finally agreed after I framed it as a business investment with a proper agreement. As they left, hugging me with a mixture of gratitude and lingering uncertainty, I felt the weight of my deception. Was I helping them or manipulating them? Testing their character or setting them up for disappointment? The line between protection and deception felt increasingly blurry. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I'd set my plan in motion, but the guilt of lying to the people I loved most was heavier than anticipated. Still, I reminded myself of the cautionary tales and the long-term goal, to help my family sustainably without destroying our relationships in the process. The real test had just begun. Over the next few weeks, I proceeded with my plan, meeting individually with each family member to provide the promised funds. Each meeting revealed something different about their characters and priorities. My parents were first. I visited their home on a Saturday morning with a check for $8,000 and a simple agreement I'd drafted. My mother made coffee while my father sat uncomfortably at the kitchen table, clearly struggling with accepting money from his daughter. "This doesn't feel right, Jess," he said, turning the envelope over in his weathered hands. "Parents are supposed to help their children, not the other way around." "Think of it as me returning the favor for all those years you supported me," I replied, feeling a pang of guilt at the partial truth. "You put me through college, helped with my first apartment, everything. Let me help now." After much discussion, they reluctantly accepted, promising to use the money for long-overdue dental work for my mother and to repair their leaking roof. My father insisted on creating a repayment schedule, even when I tried to wave it away. Their integrity was exactly what I'd expected, and it made my deception feel even worse. Mike was next, meeting me at a coffee shop near his office. Unlike our parents, he came prepared with a business plan and growth projections. "I'm not taking handouts," he said firmly, spreading his documents on the table. "This is a business investment. I'll give you a 10% return when these new marketing strategies pay off." I admired his determination but noticed how he overcompensated for his wounded pride with grandiose projections. The numbers seemed overly optimistic, bordering on fantasy. When I gently questioned some assumptions, he became defensive. "You don't understand the industry, Jess. Trust me, this is going to work. By next year, I'll be expanding to commercial properties across the county." I wrote him a check for $10,000, the largest amount of my inheritance loans, structuring it as a business investment as he requested. As he left, I worried that his pride might lead him to take unnecessary risks to prove himself. Natalie invited me to her home while the kids were at school. Unlike our parents or Mike, she seemed almost casual about accepting the money, already listing things she planned to purchase before I'd even handed over the check. The kids desperately need new clothes and computers for school, she explained as I wrote out the check for $7,000. And, honestly, Greg and I could use a weekend away to recharge. It's been so stressful with his job situation. I nodded while adding a specific note to our agreement about the funds being used primarily for the children's needs and catching up on household bills. Natalie barely glanced at it before signing. "You're a lifesaver, Jess," she said, hugging me. "I don't know what we would have done without this help." Her gratitude seemed genuine, but something about her eagerness made me uneasy. I made a mental note to check in specifically about the children's needs in the coming weeks. Amy was last, meeting me at a park while her son played on the playground. Unlike the others, she brought a detailed budget showing exactly how she would allocate the $5,000, mostly toward childcare and textbooks, with a small amount for a used laptop she needed for classes. "I've calculated that this will help me graduate one semester earlier," she explained, her expression serious. "That means I can start earning a real salary sooner and pay you back faster." Her thoughtfulness and planning impressed me. When I suggested she might use some of the money for something enjoyable for herself and her son, she looked surprised. "That's not why I'm accepting this," she said quietly. "This is an investment in our future, not a treat. Every dollar needs a purpose." As the weeks passed, I carefully observed how each family member used the money, gathering information through casual conversations and social media. The results were illuminating and sometimes disappointing. My parents, as expected, used the money exactly as discussed. They fixed the roof, got my mother's dental work done, and even returned $500 they felt they didn't need, despite my protests. They kept meticulous records of every expense and started making small monthly repayments, despite my insistence that it wasn't necessary. Mike invested in new equipment and marketing materials for his landscaping business as planned. However, I noticed he also leased a new truck with prominent company branding, something not included in the business plan we'd discussed. When he landed a small commercial contract, he immediately expanded his staff and took on additional overhead before securing more business. His risk-taking worried me, though his enthusiasm was touching. Amy adhered precisely to her budget, sending me receipt images without my asking. The childcare arrangement she found allowed her to take on additional credits, accelerating her program as planned. When her son needed new shoes, she bought a quality pair on sale rather than the flashy expensive ones he initially wanted, using it as a teaching moment about value and priorities. Most concerning was Natalie. Through social media posts and family conversations, I realized she hadn't used the money as agreed. Instead of prioritizing the children's needs, she and Greg had taken a weekend trip to a luxury resort, posting lavish dinner photos while tagging them #selfcare and #deserved. When I visited their home, I noticed new designer handbags and electronics, but the children were still wearing the same worn clothes. When I gently asked about the kids' new computers she had mentioned, she became defensive. "We're getting to that. Greg and I needed to recharge first. You can't pour from an empty cup, right? The kids are fine for now." The mixed results of my experiment left me with complicated feelings. I was proud of some family members and disappointed in others, but most of all, I felt increasingly guilty about my deception. I was essentially manipulating people I loved, testing them without their knowledge or consent. The justification that I was protecting my wealth seemed increasingly hollow when weighed against the dishonesty. Meanwhile, I was making small changes to my own lifestyle. I moved to a slightly nicer apartment in the same neighborhood, explaining it as a good deal I couldn't pass up. I replaced my 12-year-old car that constantly needed repairs with a newer, reliable model, nothing flashy, but definitely an upgrade. I started buying higher-quality groceries and occasionally treating friends to dinner without worrying about the bill. Each change required a cover story. The apartment was a lucky find with a special move-in rate. The car was certified pre-owned with great financing. The occasional generosity was explained as doing better with investments lately. The web of small lies grew increasingly complex, and keeping track of what I'd told to whom became its own source of stress. The emotional toll of living a double life was becoming difficult to manage. I was sleeping poorly, constantly anxious about slipping up or being discovered. The relationships I was trying to protect were being undermined by my own dishonesty. I began to wonder if the protection of my wealth was worth the cost to my integrity and peace of mind. 3 months after my lottery win, I was still maintaining my facade of normalcy. I continued working at my accounting firm despite having absolutely no financial need to do so. Each morning, I dressed in my business casual attire, packed my lunch, and commuted to the office where I processed financial statements and tax documents for clients who had a fraction of my wealth. The irony wasn't lost on me, especially during our staff meeting when the firm celebrated saving a client $15,000 in taxes, an amount I now earned in daily interest. The dynamics within my family had shifted subtly but significantly since my loans. Regular family dinners had become charged with undercurrents of new tensions and expectations. What had once been simple gatherings now felt like performance evaluations as I unconsciously assessed how everyone was handling their financial assistance. Natalie was the first to ask for more money. She called on a Tuesday evening, her voice carrying that particular tone of forced casualness that immediately put me on alert. "Hey Jess, how's it going?" she began, before launching into a 20-minute update about the kids' activities and Greg's job search. Finally, she reached her point. "So, I was wondering if you might have a little more of that inheritance available?" The first amount was so helpful, but with the kids' summer camps and some unexpected car repairs, I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach. My research through social media and family conversations had revealed that the previous money had gone primarily to luxury purchases and dinners out. The children's summer activities had already been paid for by our parents as birthday gifts. "I thought we agreed the money would go toward the kids' immediate needs and catching up on bills," I said carefully. "It did," she insisted quickly. "But you know how expenses keep coming up with 3 kids. Just another $3,000 would make such a difference right now." I refused as gently as I could, suggesting we review how the initial funds were used before discussing additional help. Her tone cooled immediately. "I didn't realize the money came with ongoing surveillance," she said sharply. Greg was right. Loans from family always have invisible strings attached. The conversation ended awkwardly, and I noticed she didn't post on social media for a week afterward, unusual for someone who typically shared multiple updates daily. Mike's situation evolved differently. His landscaping business showed genuine improvement thanks to the new marketing materials and equipment. He'd secured several residential contracts and one small commercial property. When we met for coffee, he proudly showed me his increasing revenue numbers. "The investment is already paying off," he declared, sliding a check across the table. "First installment of your return, as promised." I tried to refuse, but he insisted. "A deal is a deal. My business is turning around because you believed in me when the banks wouldn't." What Mike didn't mention, but I discovered through conversations with our parents, was that he was taking increasingly larger risks, leveraging his new contracts to bid on projects beyond his company's capacity. He was working 18-hour days, sleeping on a cot in his office, and pouring every dollar back into expansion rather than establishing stability first. His success was real but precarious, built on a foundation of exhaustion and overextension. My parents continued to be conscientious about their loan. They'd already repaid nearly $1,000 in small monthly installments, despite my repeated assurances that there was no rush. My mother called regularly with updates on their home repairs and my father's improved health since reducing his work hours at the hardware store. "We're thinking of taking a small weekend trip to celebrate our anniversary," my mother mentioned hesitantly during one call. "We haven't gone anywhere in 5 years, but if you think we should put that money toward repayment instead." The fact that they sought permission for such a modest pleasure with their own money broke my heart. I insisted they take their trip and enjoy themselves without guilt. Amy continued to impress me with her discipline and focus. She was excelling in her medical administration program while maintaining her job and caring for her son. When her laptop unexpectedly died, she researched options extensively before purchasing a reasonably priced replacement rather than immediately asking for additional help. She had even started a small emergency fund with the money she saved through careful budgeting. "Your loan changed everything," she told me over lunch one day. "It's not just the money, it's having someone believe in me enough to invest in my future. I won't let you down." Her genuine gratitude and responsibility made the contrast with Natalie's entitlement even more stark. The real crisis came in the 5th month after my lottery win. Natalie's middle child, 7-year-old Emma, fell from playground equipment and required surgery for a complex arm fracture. Their insurance covered most costs, but left them with a $12,000 deductible they couldn't afford. Natalie called me in tears. "The hospital wants payment arrangements immediately. We've maxed out our credit cards, and the banks won't approve another loan with Greg's job situation. I know I've already asked for more, but this is Emma, Jess. It's an emergency." I was caught in an impossible situation. My niece needed immediate medical care, and I had millions sitting in accounts that could solve the problem instantly. But revealing my wealth now would raise countless questions I wasn't prepared to answer. More importantly, it would fundamentally alter my relationship with my family before I determined how they would handle significant financial assistance. After a sleepless night, I created a solution. I contacted the hospital's billing department anonymously, claiming to represent a small family foundation that assisted with children's medical expenses. I arranged to pay Emma's medical bills directly, ensuring she received care without exposing my wealth to the family. When I told Natalie the good news about a charity covering Emma's expenses, her reaction was telling. Rather than simple gratitude, she seemed almost disappointed that the financial crisis had been resolved without accessing more of my money. "That's great," she said after a pause. "I guess we got lucky. Though it would have been simpler if you could have helped. Family helping family, you know." The strain of deception was taking an increasing toll on my mental health and relationships. I found myself withdrawing from social interactions to avoid the constant lies. Friends noticed my distraction and unusual spending patterns, small upgrades that didn't align with my accountant's salary. I developed a habit of deflection, changing subjects when financial matters arose in conversation. I began making bigger life changes, knowing I couldn't maintain the charade indefinitely. I gave notice at my accounting firm, explaining I was starting a small financial consulting business that would give me more flexibility. I started viewing houses in upscale neighborhoods under the guise of researching the market for potential investments. I replaced my wardrobe gradually with higher quality items, justifying each purchase with elaborate explanations no one had actually requested. The suspicious glances from family members increased with each change. During a Sunday dinner, I noticed Natalie and Mike exchanging looks when I mentioned a business trip to New York the following month, something my previous job would never have required. My father pulled me aside as I was leaving. "Jess, you know you can tell us if something's going on, right? These changes in your life, we just want to make sure you're okay." The concern in his eyes made the lie stick in my throat. "Everything's fine, Dad. Better than fine, actually. The consulting business is taking off faster than I expected." As I drove home, I realized my well-intentioned plan was unraveling. The tests had shown me valuable information about my family's characters, but at the cost of authentic relationships. The wealth I'd been protecting was becoming a prison of secrecy and lies. Something would have to change, and soon. 6 months after winning the lottery, I finally submitted my formal resignation at the accounting firm. My boss seemed genuinely confused, especially when I declined his counteroffer of a significant raise and partnership track. "You're one of our most reliable people, Jessica," he said, frowning at my resignation letter. "What does this consulting business offer that we can't match?" "Freedom," I answered honestly. "The ability to choose my projects and set my own hours." It was perhaps the first completely truthful statement I'd made in months. Word of my career change spread quickly through my family. At first, they were supportive, if somewhat puzzled by my confidence in leaving stable employment for the uncertainty of self-employment. I'd created a website and business cards for my fictional consulting firm, complete with carefully crafted case studies of non-existent clients. The elaborate facade was both impressive and disturbing. I was becoming remarkably skilled at deception. The real trouble began when I purchased my new car. After months of driving my practical, middle-range sedan, I finally indulged in one modest luxury, a new Audi A4. Not the most expensive vehicle by any means, but distinctly nicer than anything I'd ever owned or could reasonably afford on an accountant's salary or as a startup consultant. I hadn't planned to reveal the purchase to my family so soon, but fate intervened when I arrived at my parents' house for dinner and parked in the driveway. Mike was outside, helping our father with yard work when I pulled up. He froze, rake in hand, staring at the gleaming vehicle. "That's new," he said as I stepped out, his expression unreadable. "Got a good deal," I replied automatically, the practiced lie sliding out easily. "End-of-year model, great financing terms." Mike ran his hand along the pristine paint job. "Must be some consulting business you've started. Most entrepreneurs I know eat ramen for the first couple of years." His tone held an edge I wasn't accustomed to hearing from my supportive brother. Before I could respond, Natalie pulled up with her family. Her eyes widened at the sight of my car, and I saw her exchange a look with Greg. The tension followed us inside. Throughout dinner, I caught my family members studying my appearance, the subtle designer label on my blouse, the new watch on my wrist, the highlights in my hair from an expensive salon rather than my usual budget chain. Conversation flowed awkwardly until Natalie finally set down her fork with deliberate precision. "So, Jessica, when exactly did you come into all this money?" The table fell silent. My mother looked alarmed, my father uncomfortable. Mike stared at his plate while Greg watched with undisguised curiosity. Even the children seemed to sense the sudden tension. "I told you about the inheritance," I said carefully. "And the consulting business is doing well." Natalie laughed without humor. "Right. The mysterious inheritance from a great-aunt none of us ever heard of. And a consulting business that somehow pays enough in its first month for a luxury car when you have no consulting experience." "Natalie," my father warned quietly. "No, Dad, I'm tired of the secrets." She turned back to me, eyes narrowed. "We're not stupid, Jess. You quit your stable job. You bought a new car. You're wearing clothes that cost more than my monthly rent. Something doesn't add up." My heart pounded. This confrontation was inevitable, but I wasn't prepared for it tonight, in front of everyone. "I've made some good investments," I said weakly. "Bullshit," Natalie snapped, ignoring our mother's gasp at her language. "You're hiding something. Did you get a massive settlement from the firm? Are you involved in something illegal? Or do you just have a rich boyfriend you're not telling us about?" "That's enough," Mike interrupted. "Jess doesn't owe us explanations about her personal finances." "Really?" Natalie turned on him. "You're defending her? When she gave us those loans while clearly sitting on a pile of money herself. She made us grovel for help while secretly living large." The accusation stung because it contained a kernel of truth. I had made them ask for help while having the means to give much more. The test I designed suddenly seemed cruel when described in those terms. "It wasn't like that," I protested, feeling the situation spiraling out of control. "Then what was it like?" Natalie pressed. "Why all the secrecy? Why the fake story about a modest inheritance when you clearly have much more?" "We're supposed to be family." The pressure of months of deception finally broke through. "Fine. You want the truth?" The inheritance was larger than I said. Significantly larger. I didn't tell anyone because I needed time to figure things out without everyone treating me differently or asking for money. The admission hung in the air. My mother looked hurt, my father confused. Mike's expression was complex, understanding mixed with disappointment. Natalie appeared simultaneously vindicated and angry. "How much larger?" she demanded. I hesitated, still not ready to reveal the full truth. "Enough to change my life. But that doesn't mean I'm obligated to change everyone else's overnight." "So you lied to us," Natalie said flatly. "You tested us with those little loans while watching to see if we were worthy of your precious money." The accuracy of her assessment left me speechless. "That's not fair, Natalie," my father interjected. "Jessica has always been responsible with money. She had the right to privacy. Privacy is one thing. Manipulation is another, Natalie shot back. She gave us just enough to see how we'd react, like we were lab rats in some experiment. Meanwhile, Emma needed surgery, Greg still can't find decent work, and we've been struggling to keep the lights on. I helped with Emma's medical bills, I said defensively. The charity that covered them, I stopped abruptly, realizing my mistake too late. Natalie's eyes widened. There was no charity, was there? That was you too. More manipulation, more secrets. The room fell silent. I looked around at my family's faces, hurt, confusion, betrayal, and realized how badly I'd miscalculated. In trying to protect my wealth and our relationships, I'd damaged the trust that was the foundation of those relationships. I think I should go, I said quietly, standing up. That's it? You drop this bomb and just leave. Natalie's voice rose. Classic Jessica, always the responsible one, always in control, always knowing what's best for everyone else. I was trying to protect everyone, I insisted, tears threatening. Protect us or test us? Mike asked quietly, his calm question cutting deeper than Natalie's anger. My mother reached for my hand. Honey, we could have helped you manage this. You didn't have to carry it alone. I'm sorry, was all I could manage before grabbing my purse and heading for the door. The sound of Natalie's bitter laugh followed me out. In my new car, the visible symbol of my deception, I finally broke down. Tears blurred my vision as I pulled over a few blocks away, unable to drive. The carefully constructed plan had collapsed, exposing not just my financial secret, but something worse, my fundamental distrust of the people I claimed to love most. I'd told myself I was being prudent, responsible, even kind by testing them before sharing my wealth. But tonight had revealed the ugly truth. I had appointed myself as judge of their worthiness, doling out help with strings attached, watching and evaluating their every move from a position of hidden power. The realization was devastating. As my tears subsided, I faced the truth I'd been avoiding. The lottery hadn't created this situation, it had merely revealed something about myself I didn't want to see. My need for control, my fear of being used, my inability to trust completely. The money had been an excuse, not a reason. Sitting in my luxury car with millions in the bank, I felt utterly alone. The wealth that was supposed to bring freedom had become a wall between me and the people I loved. Something had to change, and it had to start with me. For an entire week after the disastrous family dinner, I isolated myself in my apartment. I ignored calls from my parents and Mike, too ashamed and confused to face them. Natalie didn't call at all. The silence from her was somehow worse than anger would have been. On the third day, I contacted a therapist who specialized in sudden wealth syndrome, a psychological condition experienced by people who come into large sums of money quickly. Dr. Levine had worked with lottery winners before, and she agreed to see me immediately when I explained my situation. What you're experiencing is actually quite common, she explained during our first session. Sudden wealth creates a unique type of stress. People think money solves problems, but it often creates new ones, particularly in relationships. I've ruined everything, I admitted. I tried to be careful, to test the waters before revealing the full amount, but it came across as manipulative and distrustful. Were you being manipulative? She asked directly. Her bluntness startled me. I was trying to protect both them and myself. By deceiving them and setting up tests they didn't know they were taking, she clarified. Tests where you were the only one who knew the rules or the stakes. Put that way, my actions sounded worse than I'd allowed myself to acknowledge. Over 3 intensive sessions, Dr. Levine helped me understand the psychology behind my decisions. My fear of being valued only for my money was valid, but my approach had undermined the very relationships I was trying to preserve. She helped me see that true generosity came without surveillance or judgment, and that trust was a two-way street. Your family deserves the dignity of making their own choices, even if those choices aren't what you would make, she explained. Financial assistance with hidden agendas isn't really assistance, it's control. With her guidance, I developed a plan for coming clean completely. I contacted my financial advisor and lawyer to prepare for full disclosure to my family. We created clear documentation of my lottery win, the current state of my finances, and initial proposals for family assistance that could be adjusted based on their input. Then I sent a text to everyone. I need to tell you the full truth. Please meet me at my apartment Sunday at 2 p.m. It's important. The responses varied. My parents replied immediately with concern. Mike sent a simple "I'll be there." Amy responded with confusion but confirmed she would come. Natalie's response came hours later. Fine. The days leading up to Sunday were filled with anxiety and preparation. I cleaned my apartment obsessively, ordered catering, and rehearsed what I would say. My financial advisor agreed to be present to answer technical questions and lend professional credibility to the discussion. When Sunday arrived, I felt physically ill with nervousness. As my family members arrived one by one, the tension was palpable. My mother hugged me tightly, whispering, "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." My father squeezed my shoulder reassuringly. Mike offered a tentative smile. Amy looked completely bewildered. Natalie entered last, her expression guarded, keeping physical distance between us. Once everyone was seated in my living room, I took a deep breath and began. "Thank you all for coming. I owe you an apology and a complete explanation." I swallowed hard. The inheritance story was partially true, but not in the way you think. 6 months ago, I inherited a large sum of money, not from a relative, but from the Colorado State Lottery. The stunned silence was broken by my mother's gasp. "I won $47 million in the Powerball drawing," I continued, my voice shaking slightly. "After taking the lump sum and paying taxes, I received approximately $18 million. I paused as the information sank in. Expressions of shock, confusion, and disbelief crossed their faces. I kept it secret because I was terrified of how it would change our relationships. I've read so many stories about lottery winners whose lives were destroyed, families torn apart by greed, winners harassed by constant requests, people who lost everything because they weren't prepared for sudden wealth. $18 million, Natalie repeated, her voice hollow, while we were struggling to pay Emma's medical bills. "I know," I acknowledged, feeling the weight of her accusation. "I handled this all wrong. The loans, the tests, the secrecy. I convinced myself I was being prudent, but I was really just afraid. Afraid of being used, afraid of making mistakes, afraid of losing the people I love because of money rather than keeping them because of it." I introduced my financial advisor, who briefly explained the structures I had created to manage and protect the wealth, then tactfully stepped into the background. "I've prepared documents showing exactly what happened, where the money is now, and some initial thoughts on how I'd like to help each of you. But these are just proposals, starting points for discussion. This isn't about me deciding what you deserve. It's about finding ways to use this unexpected blessing to improve all our lives while preserving our relationships." The reactions around the room varied dramatically. My father looked concerned rather than excited, his forehead creased with worry about what this meant for me. My mother wiped tears, whether from hurt at my deception or relief at the revelation, I couldn't tell. Mike sat back, running his hands through his hair. "This explains a lot. But Jess, why didn't you trust us enough to tell us?" "It wasn't about trust, exactly," I tried to explain. Or rather, I didn't trust myself to handle it correctly. I was overwhelmed and scared. "So you decided to test us instead," Natalie said, her voice tight. "Watching how we used your precious loans to see if we were worthy of your real help." Her words stung because they contained truth. "You're right," I admitted. "I was judging and evaluating all of you without your knowledge or consent. It was wrong, and I'm truly sorry." Amy, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "I understand why you were scared, Jessica. But finding out we were being tested, it makes me question every interaction we've had for months. That perspective, that my deception had retroactively tainted even genuine moments, hadn't occurred to me, and it hurt to recognize." "What happens now?" my father asked practically. "What do you want from us?" "Nothing," I said honestly. "I don't want anything from you. I want to offer help where it's needed, without strings or surveillance. But first, I needed to tell you the complete truth and ask for your forgiveness." I distributed folders containing detailed proposals tailored to each family member's situation. For my parents, a retirement fund that would provide complete financial security, healthcare coverage, and funds to renovate their home or relocate if they wished. For Mike, investment in his landscaping business with proper structure and mentorship, plus personal financial security. For Natalie and her family, education funds for the children, assistance with their mortgage, and career retraining opportunities for Greg. For Amy, comprehensive support for her education, childcare, and a down payment on a home when she was ready. These are just starting points, I emphasized as they reviewed the documents with expressions ranging from disbelief to suspicion to cautious hope. I want your input. This is a conversation, not a pronouncement. This is overwhelming, my mother finally said, closing her folder. We need time to process this, Jessica. My father nodded in agreement. This changes everything. That's what I was afraid of, I admitted quietly. Natalie stood abruptly. I need some air, she said, stepping onto my balcony. Through the glass, I could see her shoulders shaking as Greg joined her, putting his arm around her. Mike studied me thoughtfully. You could have just told us from the beginning. Given us a chance to rise to the occasion. I know that now, I acknowledged. I was trying to protect the money from damaging our relationships, but my secrecy did more damage than honesty would have. Amy approached and hugged me unexpectedly. I'm still processing all this, but I understand why you were scared. Money changes people. I've seen it even with small amounts. The afternoon continued with questions, explanations, emotional outbursts, and cautious reconciliations. My parents moved between hurt at my lack of trust and concern about how I would handle this wealth. Mike oscillated between excitement about business possibilities and disappointment at my deception. Amy remained pragmatic but distant, carefully evaluating what this meant for her and her son. Natalie remained the most affected. When she finally rejoined us, her eyes were red. I'm still angry, she said bluntly. Not about the money itself, but about being manipulated. About watching my daughter suffer while you had millions. About being judged without knowing I was being judged. You have every right to be angry, I acknowledged. I can't undo what I did. I can only apologize and try to do better moving forward. And what if we fail your tests in the future? She asked bitterly. Will the help disappear? There are no more tests, I promised. Whatever help we agree on comes without surveillance or judgment. I've learned my lesson. As the day wore on, the initial shock began to settle into cautious adjustment. By evening, we had reached no firm conclusions, but had established a framework for moving forward. Each family member would take time to consider the proposals, consult with their own advisors if desired, and we would reconvene in 2 weeks to begin making concrete plans. As they prepared to leave, each interaction reflected our changed reality. My father hugged me tightly, whispering, I'm worried about you, Jessie. Money doesn't make life simpler. My mother held my face in her hands. We love you for you, not for any of this. Don't forget that. Mike shook his head with a half-smile. We could have handled this together from the start, you know. That's what family does. Amy's goodbye was polite but reserved, her trust clearly shaken by the revelation that she had been unwittingly evaluated. Natalie's parting words stayed with me longest. At the door, she turned back. I'm still processing all this. But I want you to know, I would have preferred honesty with smaller help than deception with millions. The money matters less than knowing where we stand with each other. After everyone left, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the remnants of our meeting, coffee cups, folders, notepads filled with questions and ideas. The secret that had consumed me for months was finally out in the open. The relationships I had tried so carefully to protect were damaged but not destroyed. Where we would go from here remained uncertain, but at least we would move forward in truth rather than deception. The revelation had exposed not just my financial situation, but deeper truths about character, both my family's and my own. Money hadn't created our strengths or weaknesses, it had merely revealed what was already there. And perhaps that was the most valuable lesson of all. 1 year after winning the lottery, my life had transformed in ways both expected and surprising. The most visible changes were the obvious ones. I had purchased a comfortable but not ostentatious home in a safe neighborhood with a garden I tended myself. I drove a nice but not flashy car. I had established a small foundation that focused on educational opportunities for low-income students, work that brought genuine fulfillment beyond anything I had experienced in accounting. But the most significant transformations occurred in less visible realms, in my relationships, my values, and my understanding of what truly constituted wealth. The journey with my family over that year had been neither simple nor straightforward. Each relationship evolved along its own path, with setbacks, progress, and unexpected developments. My parents initially refused the full financial package I offered, concerned about becoming dependent or changing our parent-child dynamic. After several thoughtful conversations, we reached a compromise. They accepted a retirement fund that ensured their medical needs would always be covered and allowed my father to fully retire from the hardware store. They permitted modest renovations to their home to address safety concerns and comfort issues, but insisted on keeping the house where they had raised us. Most touchingly, they established their own small charitable fund focused on veteran services, honoring my grandfather's military service. Money should do good beyond just making life comfortable, my father explained as we reviewed the charitable structure. That's the example we want to set. Their wisdom and integrity remained steady regardless of financial circumstances, confirming what I had always known about them. Our relationship gradually returned to its foundation of mutual respect, though occasionally I still caught my mother looking at me with a mixture of concern and bewilderment, as if trying to reconcile her image of her daughter with my new reality. Mike's journey proved more complex. The initial business investment transformed his struggling landscaping company into a thriving enterprise, but not without challenges. With proper capitalization and mentorship from experienced business owners I connected him with, he secured larger commercial contracts and expanded thoughtfully rather than reactively. When his company won a major municipal contract 6 months after my revelation, he called me immediately. "This happened because of the equipment and staff we could afford with your investment," he acknowledged. "But we won it because of our quality and reliability. I need you to know that distinction matters to me." His insistence on seeing my financial support as an investment rather than a gift never wavered. He established a formal repayment structure, despite my protests, and celebrated each quarterly payment with unabashed pride. Our relationship evolved into a genuine partnership of equals, with him frequently offering business insights that helped my foundation work. Amy's path forward demonstrated the most consistent growth. She approached the financial assistance methodically, first completing her degree in healthcare administration with honors. She found a position at a respected medical center with advancement potential, established a college fund for her son, and only then permitted herself to purchase a modest townhouse near good schools. Her disciplined approach to the newfound security impressed even my financial advisors. "The money accelerated my timeline, but not my goals," she explained over coffee one day. "I always knew where I wanted to go. I just needed the resources to get there." Perhaps most surprisingly, she became my closest confidant regarding wealth management questions. Her pragmatic approach and unwavering integrity made her perspective invaluable. Our relationship deepened through mutual respect rather than financial dependence. The most challenging relationship to rebuild was with Natalie. The revelation of my secret testing had cut deeply into her trust, creating a wound that needed more than money to heal. The financial assistance helped her family's immediate circumstances, clearing debts, establishing education funds for the children, and providing career retraining for Greg, but our personal relationship remained strained. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, 6 months after my revelation. I had arranged for all family members who wanted financial guidance to work with professional financial counselors. Natalie initially refused, seeing it as another form of monitoring. When she finally agreed and began working with a counselor specialized in family financial dynamics, something shifted. The counselor helped me see something I didn't want to admit. She told me during a rare lunch, just the two of us. "I was angry about your testing, but I was also angry because you were right about how I handled money. The first loan did go to unnecessary things instead of the kids' needs. I resented being right. Her honesty opened the door to genuine conversation about our different approaches to finances and the emotions underlying them. The counseling continued, not as a condition of assistance, but as a tool for her own growth. Our relationship would never return to its previous dynamic, but something new and potentially stronger began to emerge. A relationship between adults who recognized each other's flaws and strengths without judgment. Beyond my immediate family, I learned valuable lessons about friendship and community. Some friends drifted away when my financial status changed, uncomfortable with the shift in dynamics. Others remained steadfast, treating me exactly as they always had. I discovered that wealth acted as a powerful filter, revealing which connections were circumstantial and which were fundamental. I made new relationships too, particularly through my foundation work, connecting with people who shared my values rather than my financial bracket. I developed a small circle of trusted friends who knew my full story and treated it as simply one aspect of who I was rather than my defining characteristic. Through it all, I gained perspective that no financial advisor could have provided. Money, I discovered, magnified what was already present in people's characters rather than fundamentally changing them. My generous parents became more openly charitable. My determined brother became more confidently ambitious. My practical cousin became more strategically forward-thinking. My sister's insecurities and my own control issues were similarly amplified before we learned to recognize and address them. Trust, I realized, couldn't be tested or earned through artificial scenarios. It had to be extended, withdrawn, or rebuilt through genuine interactions over time. My initial approach had been fundamentally flawed not because I wanted to protect myself, but because I had attempted to engineer authentic relationships through inauthentic means. The most profound realization was how quickly the actual amount of money became almost irrelevant once basic security was established. Whether I had won 5 million or 50 million, the core questions remained the same. How would I live with purpose? Who could I trust? What did I value beyond material comfort? These questions had no price tag and could not be answered by financial advisors or wealth managers. 1 year after my win, we gathered for a family dinner at my new home. As I watched my parents laughing with Mike about his latest landscaping disaster story, saw Amy's son proudly showing Natalie's children a science project he'd created, and felt the genuine warmth of connection that had survived our most difficult year, I recognized the true nature of wealth. The lottery had given me financial resources beyond anything I had imagined. But the real fortune was sitting around my table. People who knew me completely, had seen me at my worst and most manipulative, and had chosen to rebuild relationships anyway. People who held me accountable, challenged my thinking, celebrated my successes, and forgave my failures. No amount in my bank account could equal the wealth of those bonds. As we raised glasses for a toast, my father asked me to say a few words. Looking around at the faces of those who had traveled this complicated journey with me, I spoke from the heart. A year ago, I thought winning the lottery was about protecting money from people. Now I understand it's about protecting people from what money can do to us if we let it. Thank you for teaching me the difference. Later, as guests helped clear dishes despite my protests, Natalie approached me on the patio. Would you do it all differently if you could go back? She asked, her question holding no accusation now, just curiosity. I considered carefully before answering. I would have been honest from the beginning, I said finally. The testing wasn't worth the damage to trust. But I wouldn't give back what we've all learned through this process. Sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most important destinations. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. For what it's worth, I think you're handling it well now. The money, the foundation, all of it. Coming from my harshest critic, the simple acknowledgement meant more than she could know. The lottery had changed my financial status overnight, but the journey to genuine wealth, of character, purpose, and relationship, had taken a full year of difficult growth. I had the scars to prove it, but also the wisdom they had earned. What would you do if you suddenly came into life-changing money? Would you tell everyone immediately, or keep it quiet? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, Please like and subscribe. I share new life experiences every week. And remember, the most valuable things in life can't be deposited in any bank. Thank you for coming along on this journey with me, and I wish you wealth in all the ways that truly matter.